we're just taking the picture, so you're welcome to stay on. But our speaker this morning is Mr. Belton Geddings, and I've known Mr. Geddings here probably about 8 months from another breakfast that I attend on Friday mornings called the Casey Mafia Breakfast. And he's a very interesting man. He's a South Carolina historian. And every time I sit next to him and talk, I always learn something interesting about South Carolina. And anyway, he's going to speak with us this morning. This is Mr. Geddings.
We go over and enjoy a little grits and coffee every Friday morning.
Beg pardon? New location, the Shoney's.
Where was that with that?
Yeah, he didn't get around to everybody, but it's a good, better place. We got a little private room in there.
Wait a minute, it's not bad.
Well,
No, that's where we were meeting.
It's
Yeah, but
more,
they can have that
we can
temporary
move it off and we can
Yeah.
talk. We have speakers in, show you.
I know they're trying to leave. Y'all are trying to leave.
No, we're not.
I came to talk, I was asked with the other meeting on that one morning, said, what event in history do you, I have studied in history, and I speak to the Casey Historic Society and civic organizations and stuff. I've been an accountant all my life, a top level corporate accountant. She said, they ain't supposed to have outdoor personality like you got. I'm an exception. I have always enjoyed speaking. I learned that in the Baptist church and training union back years ago. And I've always spoken to groups and learned to enjoy it. I don't have any notes. You all know, she said I didn't have but 30 minutes and we're going to get the time here. I can't talk and watch time at the same time. I'll go over. You can't say a great deal about history in 30 minutes. So I've been trying to gear something up in my mind that might be interesting to you for a 30-minute presentation. I am a talker, not necessarily a speaker. I'm open at any time. If you want to join in, ask a question, we can go in any direction in my office. But I do have a thought that I want to bring to you this morning that finally coagulated in my mind about America, which was originally formed and called the Great Experiment. How many of you ever heard it called the Great Experiment? Well, the question in my mind at this period of time is the Great Experiment about to fail? And I'll tell you why that thought is buried on my mind. I have studied a great deal about the Confederate period. I will not accept an invitation to speak on it. It's been distorted so much in books, movies, and one thing and another that even Southerners will fight you about the truth about it. If you go back and really tell the story as it really happened, everybody thinks you're crazy. But you go back and look at your documents and things, you find out that what you learned in school, not just the Yankees, but a Southern. Guess who wrote the history, folks? The Yankees. We didn't write it. We lost. And so they wrote the history, and we learned it in grammar school. It's a simple story, and that ain't what happened. You get to study, you study real history and go and look at the documents that's in Washington, one thing that you find a whole different story. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about that Confederate period, and I got a reason for doing that. I'm going off on politicians this morning, Eddie. I apologize for that. And we hope you make it. We need you. That's my whole point. Politicians have gotten us into more trouble than you ever dreamed of. Not necessarily because they're not good people. They get up there in Washington and they got this, the Republicans and the Democrats. Unfortunately, when we formed this country, and it was an experiment, we took we got tired of messing with England and the dictatorship, come on, telling us what to do, and they over beyond the English king is what started it all. The English king started a little fight with his arch enemy, the French. The French war over there. They fought and he expended money he didn't have. Then he taxed the American people to pay for it. In simple terms, that's what started the revolution. He started taxing the American the colonists for the war that he fought over there with the French. And they said, hey, we didn't have anything to do with that. Why should we have to pay for your war over there? Well, things progressed and went on, and you all know all about the tea thing. You put a tax on tea, and they sent the tea over there, dumped it in the harbor. Not only did they dump it in the harbor in Boston, they dumped it right in Charleston too. But most of the one that came to Charleston, Southerners got more sense than Yankees. Pardon me. I got some relatives up there too. But we put ours in the warehouse, and after the mills was over, we sold it. Southerners was smart. But anyway, they took it. They wouldn't let any merchant sell it because of that tax. They didn't want the tax over it. They were rebelling against the king. All right, y'all know the story of the revolution and all that we went through, and the thousands of lives, all of our ancestors fought, died, sweat for years. We won the war. 1782, British finally left Charleston, and we were free. We were free. All right, they had, by that time, 1776 actually, before that, they had formulated a group of states that were rebelling against Britain. And it was Britain, by the way. We wasn't fighting just England. They had formulated the country that they call, or the union that they call Britain. We fought Great Britain. You always see in the books, we fought England. Well, we did. They were the dominant one. But England, Irish, Scotland, Ireland and Scotland had reluctantly signed up with them and become Great Britain. And they had other colonies and what they got. Anyway, they were quite a force in the world at that time. And but we didn't see where we needed to be associated with them, so we separated ourselves from it. And we created a union here called the United States of America. People all over the world. There wasn't another democracy in the world. King of France laughed. King of England laughed. Every king over there laughed. Said it won't last. It's an experiment. It won't work. It won't work. We've made it work for a long time. Well, to make a long story short, about 1860, we are doing real good. South got cotton coming out of the airport. We producing cotton. They need this cotton up north. They got manufacturing. We got agriculture down here. We ain't got no manufacturing. They ain't got but very little. They can't grow cotton up there. It's too cold. So we knew how badly they needed this cotton. The South did. Keep that in mind. The politicians, you got to think, how did the politicians think? The average individual, make a note of this, because most people, I told them, what's his name, preacher, that I would try to bring some things. He wants to know some things that most people didn't know about. So I'm going to tell you some things that you don't know about, maybe facts, that I know that you don't know because you don't study history all the time. Well, one of the facts is that when the South seceded from the Union, about, my estimation, and this is mine, is about 80% of the people in South Carolina did not want to secede from the Union. Now, remember, there was no Confederacy. Get your facts straight as it happened, and it'll help you to understand. South Carolina was Democratic, and they believed in states' rights, and they believed that they had the right to decide whatever they wanted to. Slavery was a an issue of the day in the North and the South. Robert E. Lee and his family had freed all their slaves. Many of the southern plantation owners had freed their slaves, but a lot of them didn't for a reason. These black people that lived on the plantations this had evolved to where they were family. They listed in the records as family, and they loved each other, genuinely loved each other. The black people that had been here for generations, they didn't know what freedom was as we know it. They were born, they grew up, they worked, they ate, they were part of this big family. Yeah, the plantation owner had babies on. They couldn't go work for Mr. Jones over here. That was the bad thing about it. Nobody condones slavery, and I don't condone slavery, don't get me wrong. But it didn't quite like people think it was. And a lot of them who wanted to were free. If they asked for freedom, the plantation owned freedom. Some of them bought their freedom from their owners. There was 50,000, around 50,000 free blacks in Columbia when in 1860, when they seceded from the Union. Now, where did these people come from? They had either bought their freedom, people had given them their freedom, or they immigrated over here. All of them that came here were not slaves. You watch ETV station now, all you hear is nothing but all of us were slaves. No, they weren't. I don't condone it. I'm not saying I do. But that's another misconception that they keep putting on you. That they were all slaves. Well, they use it sometimes. But when South Carolina seceded from the Union, was the day that the news reached South Carolina that Abraham Lincoln had been elected. One thing that you don't know, even you politicians don't know, in October or 1st November of that year, 1860, the National Democratic Convention was held at Charleston, South Carolina, to elect a delegate, to elect a candidate for President of the United States. That's where the politicians got into it. They went down there and they argued and they bickered and they went and this one tried to get more concessions from that one and that one. Hey, you believe this and we don't want you to believe that, but we can't vote for it. And it went on till the last day of the convention and they hadn't elected a nominee. Well, everybody said, hey, we got the election, and somebody else said, no, we don't. We can have another meeting. You know, politicians had got cocky by that time, and they said, no, we can have another meeting if we have to. Well, the convention, to make a long story short, the convention ended with no candidate. The National Democratic Party had no candidate to run for the president of the United States. Lincoln was a Republican. He was very unpopular among his own people. The 13 states that seceded from the Union eventually, when the election was actually held, not one vote was cast for Abraham Lincoln. In the whole 13 states that seceded, plus one of the territories out west, which couldn't vote because they wasn't a state. But he was not a popular man. What he believed, he was advocating freeing the slaves. Not that he necessarily believed it. You know where Lincoln got his money from? You remember your stories that you read in your little simple history books about him reading by the firelight? He was so poor that the church, the mice moved down to the church. That's where the poor church mouse come from. They moved out of the Lincoln house, now they tried to survive. They were so poor. He grew up, he married Miss Todd, a Virginia slave family. They made their money off of slave plantation. Abraham Lincoln was as involved in slavery as anybody else was. Now, he was just like a lot of other people at that time. It was a moral issue. People had begun to believe that we shouldn't own other people. We need to do away with slavery. But they were also settling Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, that area down there. People were farmers were going down there. Good farmland, vast areas, beautiful, wonderful farmland. They needed labor. Now, if you freed a black man in South Carolina, they had gangs of people that would come up here in the night and steal them and take them back down there and put them back into slavery. Now, if this plantation owner freed one of his, as long as he owned that slave, it was his property. If you stole it, he could come after it. And he could prosecute you for stealing his property. So to protect the black people, they kept their ownership of them for some time on some of the plantations. Not everybody, but some of them did. And they loved their, I'm doing a book on the Moore family down in Sumter County, and I have their records, daily records. And they were the biggest slave owners in Sumter County. He inherited all these people. He didn't have nothing for him to do. He didn't have that much land. But they kept having children and getting bigger. The family was getting bigger.